everyone, and welcome back to the Truth and Data podcast. I am Kim, and with me I have.
I'm Adam.
And I'm Debbie.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for being here today. Debbie and I are pretty excited about this one. So we are talking with Adam, who works here at Hexordia with us. So Adam, tell us a little bit about what you do here at Hexordia.
So I do like digital forensics research. I mainly specialize in IoT forensics, but I also dabble into like development and some other things, some training.
So what's your background then? Tell me, what did you do before you came to Hexordia, or what's your education?
It was mostly all IoT forensics. I actually came from a cybersecurity background, but I moved into digital forensics pretty quickly when I started getting introduced to IoT and all the fancy, like, random devices that there are.
It's kind of cool to once you start digging into it. It's kind of addicting, right?
Yeah. Because they're all unique devices and they all have their own secrets on them. So
That leads me to ask you. So we were wanting in this episode to talk about some open source tooling. So tell me how that dovetail into you looking into open source tooling.
So a lot of the commercial tool suites that we use like every day to process cases, they're not able to really just take a IoT device start to finish in an investigation, right? So with a IoT device, they'll typically have artifacts that are in completely different formats than you might find on a mobile device or a Windows computer. So all of the rules that they write for these big tools don't necessarily work for IoT devices. So a lot of manual analysis is needed, and for that, open source tools are really nice because they tend to focus on specific artifacts and to basically uncover things a little bit more manually. And yeah.
So when you're talking about these IoT devices, give me some examples of some ones that you've taken a look at.
Oh, I've so many to count. There are like smart refrigerators to like dog feeders to, oh my God, they're like routers to like just all sorts of things.
Wearables?
Yeah, wearables are
Okay.
on there too. Rings, doorbells. Doorbells is a really big one. They have tons of evidence on those. Those are super valuable.
So when you say that they're not all in the same format, I mean, I guess because of what, that there's so many manufacturers of these devices?
Yeah, that's one thing. But on top of there being so many manufacturers, there are also a lot of times what they do is they'll release one device, but then they'll change all of the internals and they'll re-release it, but the outside will look the same. They'll still advertise it the same, but they can have like 3 or 4 different devices, but just under the same model. And it can happen a lot. And you don't necessarily know until you crack it open and take a look. It's like, hey, that's not the chip that was supposed to be in here. So it's more common than you think.
So I have a question, and again, everyone knows that I'm the least technical person on the podcast, but so, when you are extracting data from, say, a mobile phone, you have a port to plug it in. How do you, I'm assuming it's different on every device, but how do you extract data from these devices so that you can actually look at it?
So yeah, you are right about it being different. The big it depends.
Okay.
A lot of these IoT devices come with their own app. So a lot of mobile forensics kind of ties into it, but you're not going to get everything off of the mobile, not every single time. Sometimes there are online accounts which you might need to do a subpoena or warrant for, that kind of thing.
Okay.
But the actual devices themselves, they typically have like chips on them which store data, and sometimes you can plug into them. Sometimes you're lucky enough to get a USB port. A lot of times these USB ports are locked down or they're just for power. But if you actually have to open up the device a lot of times.
So you're taking it apart.
Yeah, and different degrees of taking it apart too. Sometimes there are just like pins that you can attach wires to, and you can
Okay.
interface with the device pretty easily. Sometimes you have to take the storage chip that's on it and remove it entirely and read the contents of it manually. So a lot of times you'll have to essentially destroy the device to do it. If you're careful, you can avoid like permanently destroying the device, but it's a risky process sometimes.
Okay, thank you. That helps me sort of understand, a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so depending on what data is on it is going to depend on what you actually need in order to make some sense of the data, right?
Yeah. And they change, they push updates all the time. So even though that, like, even though you think you know like what's on there, sometimes that can change up just all of a sudden, and you don't really fully know. You're not always aware of every update that they push to these devices because they're just connected independently to the internet.
Right. Okay, so that's where some of these open source toolings or even some, I guess maybe some low level scripting or something along those lines are going to be very helpful in looking at this data. Is that right?
Yeah. Open source tools are super useful because, again, you're not going to get a commercial tool is not going to be able to, like the full suite isn't going to be able to analyze it start to finish. You might be able to open it in a hex editor, which will be very helpful, but there's a lot of things that you'll have to do that's more manual that you're not going to get out of just throwing it into one tool.
Right. So that's very very helpful for you on IoT devices. And like you said, and oftentimes, our tools that we have that are kind of the one-stop shopping type tools, the larger tool suites that we are familiar with out there, they can't necessarily plan for each of these,
No,
right?
it'd be impossible. Yeah. There's
They
too
can't
many.
plan for them. And like you said, updates.
Yeah.
Yeah, so updates come along. They don't necessarily know every one of these devices that's coming out. They're all very unique, so it makes quite the challenge for them. But that gives us the opportunity for these other methods of actually looking, or other ways, kind of a more low level, to look at our data in some open source tooling. So that's one of the things, and here at Hexordia, that we pride ourselves on, is using a good amount of open source tooling so that we're able to do those deeper dives into, for example, one of our courses is data structures.
Yep.
And it's not to say that other tools don't necessarily parse those out, but we also, because we have a toolbox approach, it's also good that even if a tool does parse some data out, it's a, best practice for you to use multiple tools to actually go look at that data in other ways. And this is where you and I first started talking about open source tooling in our data structures course, right?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
go ahead.
No, I was just waiting for you to go. Sorry.
So when we, like I said, we've used quite a bit of open source tools within our courses, not just the data structures course, but all of our courses actually. And so we decided, you know what, it might be a good idea for us to try to put some of these tools together and make it a little bit easier for our students whenever they are going to use these tools in our courses. Then let's try to come up with an environment that will be a little bit easier for them. So tell me what the solution has been developed for this.
So we were looking at taking all these open source forensic tools, and we realized there was this one thing about them, and they all are installed in a bunch of different ways, and people who aren't technical aren't really able to make full use of open source tooling, just because it is difficult to learn the ways to install each one of these and get them all working together. So what we decided to do is make a Linux virtual machine and make an environment where all these tools come pre-installed that we use in our courses, and have the documentation on how to use each one paired with the tool. So you'll never be in a situation where, at least for the tools that we offer, that we teach through our courses, you'll be able to use them right away without having to install. There's nothing finicky to it, and use them right away.
So that's a little bit of I think, a challenge sometimes for examiners when they first start to use open source tooling. Is there's a little bit of fear in making sure that they're doing it correctly, right?
Yeah.
And I think this helps to take that away. So tell me a little bit more about this. So you've come up with this basically this Linux virtual machine, and students are going to be able to use these tools that we use within our courses. And how is this? First off, what's it named? Is there a name?
It is the Evanol Virtual Machine. So you might see it referred to as Evanol VM from time to time. That is the name of the distro.
I love it. So we have our Evanol VM, and it's going to be available in our courses for our students to be able to tell me how they start with this. If they're going to need to download it, right?
Yes. So there is a OVA file, which is basically a portable format that holds a virtual machine. And you're gonna VirtualBox is probably the best option to do this with. So you can install VirtualBox for free, and you can put it on your computer. And then you download the OVA file, and then you can just import it into the VirtualBox. And we're having instructions posted on exactly how to do that. There's a few more steps involved, like a couple settings boxes that you have to check, but it's pretty basic to actually install and get up and running. And the reason for that is we want to make sure that it is accessible to anybody and everybody who wants to get started in digital forensics. So everything is free.
That's
okay,
awesome.
so you don't necessarily have to take one of our classes in order to be able to download this and use it.
No, but it's extremely useful for when you are taking any of our courses. All of the tools that we offer in our courses are organized per folder in this virtual machine. So if you are taking one of our courses, you can just go through in the VM, click on, oh, I'm taking HDSC today. I click on the HDSC folder, and you see all the tools that are associated with that course. So you can just double click on any of them, even the command line tools, and it will display a help message and display all the information that you need to actually get started with using the tool.
All right, so that's going to be very helpful. So tell me, you sign up for our courses then, and prior to the course, you are looking at, maybe you get an email, it's going to say, hey, there's some things for you to download and some preparation. Tell me how folks are going to be walked through that.
So we have some video guides and PDF guides that you can just walk through. They'll basically go through step by step. On the PDFs, there's a lot of screenshots and like big arrows that point to everything you have to click on in order to actually get through that process. And the videos, of course, they'll show you start to finish on how to start with none of the things and end up with the whole thing up and running.
So when you just want to get started, let's say just with Evanol VM, tell me about our course. Would you call it a mini course? What would you call it that we have available for that?
Yeah, so we have a course on our page that essentially walks through various things about setting it up and actually using some of the tools and the file system, because it's not the standard Windows file explorer. It's a slightly different one, but there's a course that there's a guide for each thing, and it will tell you how to walk through each of those. So yeah, the file system itself, it has its own module on that, so you can open the thing and basically get started right away.
So what we're talking about in terms of it's when we say it's on our page, if you go to learn.hexordia.com,
Yep.
that is where you'll be able to look for Evanol VM and for the training session, which is free, along with the downloads that Adam's just told you about. And within that training session, which is all online and self-paced, you can walk through all of that yourself and go, with what you've downloaded, with the very detailed instructions that are going to help you through each portion of this. I think it's going to help folks to, for the ones who maybe have that block and feeling like, I'm not exactly comfortable. Hopefully this is going to ease some of those fears.
Yeah. one of the big things that people see is when they go to start using an open source tool is that they're greeted with a page on GitHub with a bunch of code in front of them, and it can be a little intimidating because, like, how do I turn this page that I'm seeing into something I can run on my computer and actually use in my day-to-day work, right? It doesn't always look like a straightforward process. A lot of times there's just a downloadable executable and you can just run it right on your system immediately, but many times there's not. You have to build it yourself, compile it, or many different things you might have to do. Depends on the tool.
We will link where this course or where this the Evanol free tool is in the show notes.
Yes, absolutely. So when we are like you said, when you go to GitHub or wherever you may be going to get some of these open source tools, as you mentioned, it's not always as straightforward because really it's a low level type of code, right? I mean, it's instructions for the computer, if you will. So it's not really just a matter of you having not always, sometimes you have a nice pretty GUI that you can click on and it tells you exactly what you're clicking and what it's going to do. But oftentimes these are command line. They are, making sure that certain files are in a particular folder. There's a little bit more to it than just so much as, us installing, downloading an executable and installing it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I will say learning how to use the command line is probably one of the most rewarding things you can do when it comes to actually learning how to do deep dives on different devices, especially in IoT. It's basically vital to actually start getting familiar with that. But what we do with this distro is we try to hold your hand a little bit and help you get started so you can actually get familiar with those things.
And it's great because it may be something that you're not maybe you're not necessarily used to this, and you're needing to or want to be led through it. But also, if you are very well versed within open source tooling, it's still a great thing for you to have because it is a kind of a one-stop shopping for some of these open source tools. And there are guides. Maybe you're going to learn about some of these tools that you haven't known about before, or maybe you're going to find a different way, or see an updated version or something along those lines. So it's I think very helpful.
Well, having things all in one place seems like a huge time saver, and we all know time is a precious commodity, so having things all in one place just seems super convenient.
Absolutely. Yes, I agree. So Adam, tell me more about this. So first off, what I'm going to do is if I decide that I want to use this, I'm going to go download what you mentioned. There's also, I'm going to sign up on learn.hexordia.com so that I can take the free course that's going to guide me through this. And then I'm really going to have step-by-step for each of these tools, right?
Yeah, so each tool that we teach is going to have a guide on there, and how to set up some things like shared folders is that's also going to be included. That's one of the features that we have on here is the ability to share folders between your Windows machine that you're using to run it, or your actual Linux machine. So you'll be able to, without moving the data physically into the virtual machine, you just put it in a folder on your desktop, and you will be able to use tools from your host machine and tools from your Linux machine just together, so you can work on the same data. Yeah.
Right. So the other part that I think is going to be very helpful is that, what if I'm sitting here listening to this, I'm thinking, what, this sounds neat and cool. However, I don't work on a Linux machine every day. This isn't something that I do. So then tell me, within the training, there are also screenshots and video how-tos on how to use this on your Windows machine also, right?
Yeah. So there are a lot of tools that are Windows only, and the nice thing about this virtual machine is that it supports many of these tools. So uses Wine. So Wine is essentially like a compatibility layer for Linux where you can run Windows only applications. So you can do that, and you can run a lot of things like Notepad++. That is a tool that a lot of people have installed, but you can run it natively on through Wine. On Windows, you can also run whatever tools that you already have installed. So if you have Axiom, for example, and you want to use it on the data, you can. But on the same time, you can have your virtual machine running, and you can use any of the open source tools on there on that data simultaneously. So you're not moving data around to a completely different computer to do analysis, right? It's on that same access to data.
That's great. That is fantastic. So, so tell me, Adam, when you are looking at, let's say that with going back to your IoT devices, and let's say that you have been able to successfully get some data from one of these devices, however, whichever method that you had to go through, right? And you don't really have a solution for that. Nothing is actually parsing it, or nothing is available for you. Take me through your starting mindset, process your thoughts. How are you going to start wanting to parse this data out?
With an IoT device, like, so when your tools, like your commercial tools, don't always work from the start, what I typically do is I take that image and I put it in binwalk. Binwalk is the first thing I always do, because binwalk can tell you a little bit about what might be in there, even if it's not able to create a full forensic report about it. It's not able to do that, but a lot of times it's able to separate out the pieces of that image, right? Sometimes there is a couple file systems. A lot of times in IoT devices, there's read-only file systems, which you typically won't find forensic evidence in, but it will have like information about like the system itself. And then there's going to be a read-write, which is usually where I go to go and look for, maybe there's logs in there. There's a reason why it's read-write. So that is where I would try to use binwalk to list out those file systems. And you can either use DD, or you can still use binwalk as well to extract that file system and then browse through it. A lot of times the file system, it might be a weird format. There might be some weirdness with the chip where it's not fully able to extract that and read that normally. So sometimes you have to go in the hex editor and actually look at the raw contents. And yeah, it can be a manual process sometimes, but you can pull some interesting strings out of there occasionally. So yeah.
So after you get a good feel for what data is there, then that's when that'll give you a little bit of guidance in terms of trying to figure out how you want, or what there is for you to parse out, right? Figure out what's there, and then you can figure out how you want to maybe get that out in a different type of format or something else usable.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you're doing it like an actual case, you're gonna need a test device, right? The actual device that you get from your case, you can't use to figure out what's on and stored there. You're gonna need a separate test device where you be very meticulous with how you log everything that you put into that device and see how it logs, and then you can use that knowledge to look at your the actual device from your case and pull that data from there. Because a lot of times, like extracting the data, it can be difficult, but sometimes it's relatively simple. But it's definitely simple to compared to actually being able to prove or interpret that data. That's much harder than actually extracting it out. A lot of times you'll see a string that's like, oh, I found it, but you're not entirely sure what that means until you have a thoroughly tested device that's separate from the one you're using for your case.
Right. So yeah, that's awesome, Adam. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Anything else that you feel like folks may be interested to know about Evanol VM, or anything that we're including, or how we're doing it?
Yeah, so a lot of these tools that are on Evanol VM are fully open source, and while these are a very comprehensive collection of open source tools that is on this virtual machine, I implore you to go and explore more. So on Hexordia.com, we have a blog that goes over how to get started with installing some of these tools for yourself. So maybe you spot something on GitHub and you want to use that on your own. So there's instructions there on how to basically approach these kind of tools, how to install things for Python, how to install tools that might be more written in C or C++. Tells you best practices on just how to get started with these tools and how to make them useful and incorporate them in your workflow. So
Right.
I implore you to explore and look deeper.
This is great. Well, thank you, Adam. Thank you for all your hard work on this. I know that you've spent a great amount of time on this and doing a huge amount of research yourself on helping to get everything sorted with us for Evanol VM. And then also, Adam is the author of the blog that he was referring to a moment ago, and also he has put together for us this this training course that we've mentioned. So please go to hexordia.com and check out our blog, and also on learn.hexordia.com is where you're going to be able to take that that course. So we will link everything here on the show notes, and please reach out with questions or anything you may have. So thank you, Adam, for being here with us today.
Thank you.
That's all for now. See you next time.
Bye, everybody.
All right. Bye.